Welcome back to Bonnie's Gems, everybody. We have a very special guest that needs to have a special outfit. Me and Jake decided to match today. Have a great friend of mine, Phil Brothers. Phil has just been somebody who has always had positive energy, a good human being, positive mindset, always when you're feeling down, Phil's the person I always call. And just whenever you want a good laugh or you want somebody to hang out with and have a good time, Phil's the go-to guy. And so we want to be able to share him with you guys, just to be able to hear his wisdom, his mindset. And man, me and Phil, we met probably like 16, wow, maybe even 16 to 18 years ago, man.
I believe you. If you say that, that's what it is.
It's been that long. So we were going to a church, and he showed up one day, instantly connected, and we've been hanging out ever since. So Phil, you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, man. I thinking back to that time. It was when Jake was like knee high to a grasshopper back then, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Good
so running
time.
around in diapers with a bottle in his mouth.
Yeah.
Yep, precisely, in high school.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we met back at the old church days. That was quite a jam. Some people may have called that a cult. Some people call it differently. My children definitely have that narrative for sure. But it was an interesting time for me. It was a connecting time of community, and that's where we met. We did workouts on Wednesday nights. We'd do the heavy rope and kettlebells and what was it called, insanity, and we were just trying to get ripped. Barefoot running was a thing back then. I'd be running on the streets with my bare feet. So yeah, those are some fond memories. But what do you want to know? Where would you like to start? We'll jump in.
Well, like from birth all the way until today, like how did you get to where we are?
When I was sliding down the birth canal, I was like, there it is. I could see it. I knew I was going to get somewhere. And then the doctor was like, welcome. And I was like, thank you, motherfucker. And that was how that went.
And as you can see, Phil is far removed from the old church days that we used to be fucked up. So you brought up the point that some would call it a cult. What would you call it today, looking back on it?
Good question. Yeah, I do quite a bit of reflection on that, right? And I don't know if I'm just in denial, right? And it's just like how could I be someone who was in a cult? Mm-hmm. And like, I can't be. So I can't bring myself to I don't know if it's humility or my ego of like, hey, you were duped into being in a cult and you were doing these bad things or part of these bad things. Mm-hmm. Again, we talked Josh Brown on my podcast, and that's definitely the narrative that he has. Again, my older children, same way. But for me, I would say that there were cult-like tendencies and behaviors, but I didn't feel like I was part of a cult. I feel like I could get out anytime, and I feel like a lot of times with like cult, this is like you feel like you can't leave, or if you leave, like you're giving up like so much. It never felt that high risk to me. And I would challenge, I would push back, I would question things. I didn't just blindly go with what the leadership was saying, and I didn't feel like any point that someone had like that level of control or power over me. And again, I'm also humbly open to that may be just the denial in me, and maybe I was in a cult, but it didn't feel like that to me. I think I was trying to do well, and did my best to not do harm. And when things started to feel like maybe they were going sideways or people were being ostracized or harmed, whatever, I would speak up or against that. And again, maybe I'm also glorifying 20 years ago that that's the case there. But I don't know, how does that resonate with you as far as the narrative?
Well, so for a little bit more context in what it is you're talking about, is that Phil and I met inside of a church that was considered Messianic Judaism. So essentially what that was, it was the belief in Jesus being the Messiah. Yeshua, his name, is what they preferred to be used as when you spoke. And so when he's talking about maybe some of the cultish topics, that may have been one of them, how the words are said, how his name is used, those types of things. But essentially what it was coming out of the paganism, and the traditions of Christianity. So I think a lot for me, I saw it as a light of trying to learn and seek scripture for what it was and to try to have a better understanding and to not just follow men and their traditions and their understandings um, of a religious belief system. And so it was that, and then coming into this idea of Judaism and going back to the Torah and the Old Testament, looking at the feast and the festivals and the laws and all the things that we had a good, clear evidence of being there versus, I think the big things for me were, like, why are we eating pork when it says not to eat pork? Why are we celebrating Christmas? Why is there Santa Claus? Why is there the Christmas tree? And so all of these things I think created that. But I agree with you 100% with some of the things that you shared where it had the cultish tendencies. I myself have a really hard time identifying and say I was part of a cult, mainly because of the fact that I could have gotten out of it at any point in time that I wanted, and that everybody there was really willing to discuss and confront. And I don't say agree to disagree, because there were certain things that they were very, very adamant about. And if you weren't doing that, then you weren't really part of the inner circle, or a better term would be maybe a misfit, or I kind of, what do the Amish call it when they like get rid of their kids and they kind of push them out? There's a better term.
Not ostracized, but what is it?
Yeah,
Jake knows it.
ostracized. Yeah, that's
Okay.
a perfect term for it. Yeah, you're ostracized. That, well,
Yeah.
if you believe this way, God isn't speaking to you, or you have a bad understanding, and we need to get you saved. So I agree with you on all of those aspects. I guess my big question is something as I go through this process, what I'm trying to get to is, what do you think it was that drew you to want to be a part of that, or went to that? As I think about it for myself, I think a lot of it had to do with the desire to be right and to be pure. I hope and I believe that those were my true heart conditions. But I feel like there were other things from my world beliefs and how I grew up that were essentially made that right for a place to go to be part of. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a wild reflection, honestly. So before I answer that, it's because it can go. My brain's going 3 or 4 different places of like why I was drawn to that and what was going on. But I do want to hear from Jake. So Jake, as you observed that, and Chad would come back or talk or maybe not talk, like how did that relate to you? How did that resonate? What were your feelings or visions of it? Was like, this is weird and Chad's weird, or like how did that go down for you?
I think there were a couple times, I don't know if it's the same church that you guys are talking about, but I remember actually going with him sometimes. And I remember it being like a little bit off. And it was, I don't know, it was just something that was completely foreign to me. I don't know if it's because I was a little kid or if it's because, I don't know, we didn't really go to church a whole lot growing up. And when I did go to church, it was like very, you sing songs, you learn scripture. That's pretty much it. And it was, but yeah, I mean, when I went there, he never really talked about it when he came home, but I went with him a couple times and it seemed a little bit weird to me. But then again, I was still a little kid. There was so much stuff that I just hadn't experienced. And I guess on Saturdays, we would like read the Bible sometimes and talk about it. So I guess, I don't know, I never really thought anything weird of it. But then a little bit later in life, I think before we started this podcast a little bit, he was talking more and more about it. And it was like, okay, yeah, that's like it. I was just realizing the weird stuff that was going on. And it was, yeah, I never realized it back then though.
Yeah, fair enough. I appreciate your answer there. So again, Chad, as I ponder that, right, like going back, so again, there's so many phases that have happened, right? But in my therapy, I've been doing some reflection, and one of the things that my first therapist said was like, you got married so young. So side note, I got married at 19 years old. I was engaged at 18, and he said you got married so young because of your relationship with your dad. And at that time, I was like, just like your look, Chad, I'm like, what the hell does that have to do with anything, right? And so I was confused. I never understood or pondered or studied any of that. Typically, I'm a person of action, so it's like, okay, whatever the reason was, it doesn't matter. Like, what the hell do we do now? How do we fix it? How do we move forward? Always moving forward, right? And not really looking back and spending time to reflect. Now I'm in a stage in my elderly age of 43 years old where I do a lot more reflection in that, and I'm pondering deeper tendencies that I have And so with that being the case, right, like my parents got divorced when I was like 16. So I was feeling kind of lost. My dad went overseas for the military. So I think I was a young man and kind of in need of some level of mentorship or connection. It's a beautiful thing you guys are doing here in honor of your dad. And he was physically present in the home. And, so that's a different model. But nevertheless, like I had like almost like a longing for that. And it wasn't conscious. Like I didn't know about it, right? It's not like, oh, I wish my dad was here. Like I'm a grown ass man at 16 years old.
Right.
I don't need anybody. Like I'll do whatever the hell I want. This is awesome. That was my, like, I can freely go about. There's no one to tell me what to do and boss me around military style. My dad was pretty strict growing up, so like cool, that force is gone and I can free flow, right? But there's a piece of me that I think that did need that, and felt abandoned, I think is the terminology. And so as I was seeking to heal that, what Richard Rohr talks about, heal the father wounds that we have. And even if we have a dad physically present, there's times, hey, did I get the attention maybe that I wanted or needed? Did I get the tenderness and the care and the vulnerability with my dad? If not, then we're going to have some level of gap or wound or difficulty to overcome. And most of the time, we don't even realize it until mid or upper 30s or 40s, unless you're super wise like Jake. Then you get it a lot earlier. But so I think that's kind of my journey was I'm trying to find some healing and connection to kind of fit this in. So step one was get married real young. Now I have someone who can rely on me and I can rely on them, and that feels good. And then have kids real young. So now they can rely on me and that feels connecting and that feels great. And now back to what you were saying, Chad, like tying into being right and being the best and being awesome, being really good. That is what was always rewarded, right? Like I think I was walking at like 7 months old. And again, maybe I didn't know anything. It was just like, hey, you do well and you exceed and you do better than other people, you get rewarded. Great job, kudos, attention. And so that I was like the constant hamster on the wheel of like, go do better at sports, go do better at school. Awesome. Now I get the attention and the accolades and the thing. And if I don't get that, then it's withheld or it's not given in the same level. Again, none of this was conscious at all back then, right? Like this is a lot of reflection in the last 2 to 3 years, but looking for community and connection. And like you said, being right and hanging out with those people who are right. And then I can also then rise to the top for my pride, my ego of being the best of the best or the right of the right. There was a lot of that was being fed and propagated. So I don't know if that addresses what you were asking or not.
No, because you're bringing in a lot of really good points with that. It does address exactly what I was asking. Yes, that I remember sitting inside of that church and thinking, this is the best place on earth. Like, there's no other place that I could go that has this community and where we're so close to the Creator and we have this great vision and we're connected with Him. It's like this is perfect. And I don't know if you remember, like that was said quite often inside of that community. It's like this is very, very special. This is very, very unique. So when you go back to the cultish type practices, like, well, holy cow, like that's what somebody who's in a cult would say. But again, I think when it comes to like the New York Yankees and they want to be really good, like if they're inside that team, they're gonna be like we're the best team in baseball right now. Like there's no other team that are doing this. Like we're the best. So there has to be a little bit of that mentality to be able to have success and to be able to have a tight knit community, whether you're trying to win or just drawing close to the Creator. Inside of that, I would say, you asked a great question to Jake, because that's one thing I think is important to also bring up inside of this cultish idea is that there were definitely a lot of separations that it caused between each individual person that was inside of that and maybe maybe not their immediate family, but cousins, removed people. Like for me, I stopped celebrating Christmas, and that was really, really difficult for my parents to handle. It was a very difficult issue, even though when I grew up, my dad told me like Christmas isn't something we should be celebrating, and he was pissed off that I wasn't celebrating. I'm like, Dad, like he's like, yeah, I know, but there were definitely issues that it brought about inside the family, and I'm assuming that happened with you and your family as well, right, Phil, your immediate family. And
yeah, I did a little bit. I'm thinking back, right? And so again, my story was I graduated high school, I was supposed to ship out to go to the military the day after that, and I got super sick, couldn't go. Right, so I get sick, I go home, I get better in the summer, and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go. Right, and I told my recruiter, hey, send me, I'm ready to go to the military now. They couldn't find a class for me. They wouldn't ship me out all summer long, to the point where I finally went to Sukkot in the fall. Right, like basically a Feast of Tabernacles. It's like a camping thing that Messianic people would do, and that's where I met my wife at the time. But I lost my train of thought because I probably have undiagnosed ADHD. What was the line of discussion that I was going
How
with
it was
that?
affecting your immediate family.
Yes, thank you. So with that, right, I mean, it was not just, hey, I believe a little bit differently and I'm not doing Christmas. It's like, hey, I was going to the military and I was going to be a youth pastor and I was going to do all these things. Now I'm getting married. I'm 18 years old. I have no job, no skills, no money. I'm going to go move, from Kansas to Indiana, and, here we go. So my grandpa, that's probably the only time I ever remember my grandpa crying. And he goes, I don't know who these people are that are stealing my grandson away from me. Right. So it was like a huge, heavy deal of like, my grandson's probably going to die. Like they're literally going to like steal his soul. And he was so concerned, and he's not a religious person, but it was just like so shocking. It would be the word, right? My sister was in high school still, and she felt kind of abandoned, I believe, at the time. And confused. My mom was like kind of in shock, but again, knowing that I'm going to do what I want to do, like just on principle. At that stage of my life, I was just going to do my own thing. So there was a lot of shock that has happened with my immediate family like that. Again, my dad was overseas and not really directly involved so much. So those were some of the things that showed up. But as time went on, again, my sister's pretty nomadic, so she was moving around the country, and we weren't really like hanging out, regularly. She was at college then after that, and my mom she finally moved up here to Indianapolis, about 2.5 hours away, to be close to her grandchildren. And so that was going on there. So she's been very understanding over the time, just kind of like navigate how you need to, right, to have a relationship with your family, even if I don't agree or understand fully. She navigated that well, I would say, but there was some challenge. But I was just, and I don't know if I just use it as like a fantastic, we'll say, excuse not to do crap that I don't want, like the nostalgic part of like Christmas and like, oh, this thing, and like, let's decorate and like all that. Like that sounds fucking terrible to me. Like it sounds so torturous. Like let's get out the lights and let's hang up stuff and let's get up on the ladder and then like put it all away. I'm like, this sounds like hours of unnecessary work. Like let's go hang out and do something more fun than this bullshit. So I probably
Go to some other
like
place that's already done that.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I don't know. That's kind of how some of that showed up there.
And then, so what did that process look like from being in that mindset to where you currently are, and like what did that transition look like to you?
Oh man, it's wild and messy is what it looked like.
Or maybe
Yeah, I
just
mean,
from a religious perspective, like what would you say have been the main impacts of that transition from your religious mindset?
yeah. So just kind of like the journey in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I was very big into my youth group when I was in high school. I wanted to be a youth pastor. There was a mentor I had in high school that taught me to kind of think outside the box and question authority, and like don't just take someone's word because they're a pastor, but like there needs to be some logic or understanding or biblical backing behind what they claim. So I was already in this kind of skeptical mindset, or at least challenging mindset, that kind of set me out when I was like 17, 18. And then again, turned quickly. Again, I have a tendency to do extreme things. It's all or nothing, baby. And it's just like, hey, why be a little bit religious when we could be fucking bonkers out the charts?
Because
Let's go.
at that age of 19, like, wasn't that really overwhelming to take on all of those responsibilities of being married and starting to have kids as quickly? Like, did you ever just get overwhelmed where it's like, holy cow, this is a lot? Or was
Not
it
at all.
just you were able to just go deal with everything?
Yeah. Blind faith, baby. Why worry? You just go by faith. Like it was literally like very little thinking and planning and just very like haphazard. It'll work out. It worked out for the Israelites. It worked out for Jesus. It's going to work out for me. And and I was at peace. Like there, as a general rule, I mean, again, just like life, there's occasionally like stresses a little bit, but as a general rule, like I was like, it'll work out. Like Jesus said, sell everything, give it to the poor, and go figure it out. I got more than that, and so I'm fine. Like I had, I don't know, the faith was the biggest thing, but also I think confidence in myself. Like I set myself like my mind to do something, I'm gonna figure it out. And with God on my side, like how can I fail? So there was not much concern at all. I mean, to the point where it's probably a bit dangerous as I look back. There was a lot of risks that I took. One that I can think of right early on, right? I was again 19, first baby was coming, right? Zakaria. We were having a home birth. We didn't even have a midwife. I was going to be the midwife. Ask me how medically trained and capable I was. Not at all. So I read this fucking like survival manual like that I was like, oh, I can figure this out. All right, we're good. Like crazy stuff, right? So yeah, we were living at the Moors at the time, and we had another family that we were living with. So we were living with two families. The other dude there was even more extreme than me. So I'm like, I'm not that extreme. Like, so it all worked out for his birth. It's gonna work out for ours. Dude, my baby was like stillborn, like not quite stillborn, but to the point where like we were, I don't know how many hours that the labor was. I'm gonna guess 16 to 20 hours. It was like she was bleeding. I didn't know. I wouldn't. At the sight of blood, I'm like, whoa! The book didn't talk about this. So we called like the midwife an hour and a half away in Mishawaka, drive all the way to freaking Hamilton, and she gets there as the baby's crowning, and like catches the baby. Baby is like pale white. She's like massaging its chest, and like, I mean, crazy town. So the extreme quote unquote faith was not backed by a lot of logic or reason sometimes. And we were protected in that, thankfully, but crazy times.
I mean, because to tell you the truth, as you're explaining this story, I've never actually seen a physical birth. So, like, I don't really know how to even experience, like, what you're even talking about there. So, yeah. And I forget, like, all of your children were born of, like, natural birth, right? Or
so all the babies, so again, I have 6 kids. All were born at home except for one of them. Again, back to extremeness. Like, the water had broken, and I think we waited, like, I think medically they recommend 24 hours max, and then you got to go to the hospital no matter what. It was like 2 or 3 days, right? So, yeah, okay. The midwife was observing every single day. Like, so we had a midwife for the rest of them, by the way. As extreme as that one was, we're like, all right, fuck that. Like, we're going to go ahead and step it up. And she was checking, and she was checking for infection. She was checking for heart rate, all these things that was like, hey, you're still safe to be fine and wait. And then it got to the point where like, okay, we should probably induce this. And so we went all the way to Fort Wayne, right? So 2 hours. We didn't go locally here because there was a guy out there that was more midwife friendly. And so we went out there, and it was one of the most empathetic, caring experience I've ever had with a human being, number one. But definitely in the medical field. Like, I thought we were going to be judged. You idiots. How could you wait so long? What the hell is going on? And he was just like, he said, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. And it was just like this pause, and just like a human just being like empathizing, like, you must be going through some difficulty. This was not the plan that you guys had. And I know that that's probably hard. And that alone, that empathy of just sharing, and having someone share that with me, I hadn't experienced that again in years. If ever, maybe, I don't even know. Right. And so that was an impactful thing. It was Dr. Stroud was his name. But yeah, that was Joaquin, and he was born in the hospital. That was the only kiddo born in the hospital. Although we had some home births, we had some water births, all over the spectrum. What do you want? We got it for you.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Jake, do you have any questions about that?
No, I guess, yeah, you bring up that guy in the hospital, and it's crazy how it's like moments like that where it's just, I mean, my experiences with the medical system just in general is not necessarily positive. So just hearing that and hearing somebody who's in the system just being able to relate to you and just empathizing and just sitting there, and it's crazy to think about as someone in that situation, you realize that, and it hits that hard. So it's just like, wow, this person actually cares about me. And it's wild to think about how that's so impactful.
But sometimes it's the fact that no matter what it is we're going through and how hard life seems, that for a stranger to see that and understand it is the most amount of love that one can actually be able to receive, because this is someone who doesn't know me. They don't care about me. They're not a sibling. They're not a blood relative. And for them to do that, it's just like, that's true love. Like, that's what love and empathy really is.
Yeah,
There's not more than that.
especially when it's someone, when you're in a situation where your family may not even necessarily be as empathetic or understanding as some random person that you meet. And it's just, yeah, it's very eye-opening.
Yeah, so that reminds me of, so again, ADHD brain, we're going to bounce a little bit, but tying this in. So I'm reading a book right now. It's called, I don't know, something about ghosts, something or other. It's Gabor Mate is the author.
Oh, nice.
And he's one of my favorite speakers and authors right now. He's just grandfatherly. Even just to hear him speak on a podcast is like soul warming for me.
Yeah.
But in this book, he was like at this freaking, I think it's like a hotel or like a hostel type of thing for drug addicts in Canada, in Vancouver. And like he treated like the worst addicts of all sorts. And he was a medical person basically on staff. I don't know that he lived there, but he spent a ton of time there, right? Cocaine addicts, heroin, anything you could think of, HIV, like they're killing themselves. And he's there showing up every day, being as patient as he can, and he's sharing some of these stories of just trying to be understanding and empathetic of what these people have gone through. And one of the big things he says, and I think he got this maybe from someone else who also treats trauma and addiction, but I don't ask why the addiction. I ask why the pain. And that to me is a mind-blowing thing of like, there's a reason that people are addicted, and they're running from numbing the deep pain typically that we have in our young childhood, that we didn't get the love or the care or the attention or whatever we might need. And in some cases are much more extreme abuse. But someone medical like that, like Dr. Gabor Mate, to be able to speak into that and have the bravery and the patience to engage in that, right? Because the logic on my side is like, you're an idiot, you're killing yourself, stop it. I don't have patience for this is dumb, right? And so like historically I have viewed it that way, and people with the incredible strength and bravery like Gabor is like changing my mindset in that of like, everyone has a story, everyone has a journey, and it's probably more fucked up than you imagine. And so let's show those people the love and care. And that's true for an addict, and that's true for people in our family. You know, they've gone through that maybe we don't even know about. We're sitting here and we know them, and maybe there's certain secrets that we have or things that we hold back or that they have that have caused pain or have caused personalities or have caused certain attitudes or things. Like, they're an idiot. Why don't they just stop that? Well, there's so many things that we're trying to deal with. It's tough to be human, and just acknowledging that it's a big deal.
Yeah, and for me, I look at myself as like, yeah, I'm a dipshit. Like, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done a lot of stupid ass things. But as I sit here today, I'm trying to go back and be able to evaluate what caused all those things to happen and why I was in that spot and what those things are, and to be able to associate what that pain was, and then to be able to try to heal myself from it so that I can move on and to not make those same mistakes again, because oftentimes our mistakes or the things that we do affect other people. And so now the scars that I had, I just gave to somebody else, and now they have their scars to deal with that are now associated with me, and then the scars that they're going to give to somebody else, and it's just that never-ending circle of hurt and pain that people aren't dealing with. And it's not only difficult to deal with, it's difficult to try to realize where it came from and that it's even there sometimes, man. It's just like, no, I don't have anxiety, I don't have depression, what are you talking about? Like, and it's like, to tell you the truth, I don't know if it's ever a good idea to tell someone, hey, like, I think you have anxiety. If you're like, screw you, dude. Like, like, oh, I don't have anxiety. Like, yeah, like, what do you think that's going to do to me? It's sure as hell not going to help me, like, deal with my anxiety. It's going to make me more anxious and just pointing the finger and trying to fit. Paranoid, I guess, is the biggest thing. Like, wait, do I have anxiety? If it does show up, where does it show up? Like, oh, great, now I got to work on this.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think one of the things you also shared again is like hey, I'm a dipshit, or I'm being a dipshit, or right, that self judgment, right? The critic. I think I've heard some episodes with you guys sharing, and maybe there's an episode talking about baseball. It might be the best. I think maybe Jake was speaking a little bit about that. I could be mispulling, but that internal critic of like, do better, or you're not doing well enough, and then therefore that translates to you're not good enough, and therefore you need to do action to prove you're good enough. And like this never ending cycle of trying to earn this validation from other people. Many times it's from our parents or our family, but again also for ourselves. Like, okay, I can earn X amount of money, therefore I've reached this thing, or I can go to the All-Stars or college or get a scholarship or whatever that thing is, of like, okay, I can attain. But just like almost anything, once you've done it, I think this is what Jake had said, like, then, okay, now what's next? Cool. I enjoyed that for a few seconds or minutes. Great. Now what's next? And relishing in that is difficult. But even more so, what my point was getting to is relishing in the process of self-compassion, and allowing ourselves to make mistakes. Again, I'm going to throw it out more authors. Kristen Neff, she studied at the University of Texas with Dr. Brene Brown, and those are two like some of the most impactful people on empathy, self-compassion, understanding, and therapy. That has helped me substantially. But it's easy for me to give you guys a break. I'm like, hey, give Chad a break. Hey, Jake didn't mean it like that, right? But for me, it's like, you should do better. You should know better. What the hell's going on? What's wrong with you? You got to hold yourself to a higher standard. That has been so detrimental. And in the last couple of years, I'm starting to like reflect and back off of that, to the point where I'll put my hand on my heart and say, hey, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. It's all right. And it feels weird. And it's felt weird for a while, but it's getting less weird. And it's been so healing in just being at peace with being human and being at peace with making mistakes. And it's a really big deal, and it's really hard to do, especially growing up in sports culture, masculine culture. Rub some dirt on it, move on, soldier up, no excuses. That's not always helpful for us. It serves us well in those realms, but overall, it's still detrimental, and it can feed anxiety and concern there.
So when I think about this and this being gracious to myself and trying to be considerate and compassionate, one of the things that I'm always trying to avoid is that story of you shared, where your dad wasn't really in the picture, right? So now it's his fault that you have the trauma or the pain. It's like, well, I don't want to be that person that's causing someone else that pain or that trauma. So how do I do better? And how do I put this pressure on myself? Because I don't want the story to be about me. I don't want to be judged. And as you share these things, the question that I was asking myself, I was like, okay, when we think about society, is that what society does? Is society sitting around and judging people? Like, Chad is at this position in his life because he messed up here, he messed up there, he did this. It's like, it's quite easy. And my first thought comes to mind is that yes, but as you speak deeper about this, and I start thinking about our religious background, one thing that we always did inside of the church was we asked for prayer requests. And most oftentimes the prayer requests were about other people and other parts of the family, about how they're doing bad and how they need help. And I was just like, man, as I think about this, it's like those prayer requests, they were an ask for God to help somebody, but I think it's also an opportunity for the people that you're praying for to be judged, because what they're doing in their life is imperfect, and they're not right, or they're sinning, or they're lost and they need help. And it's just an opportunity for us to judge. Like, how does that sit with you? Like what are your thoughts on that?
So it definitely happens, right? So again, it seems like it's a coping mechanism. It's almost like the Jerry Springer scenario. Hey, at least my life isn't that bad. And so I like to watch that. It makes me feel better in the things that I need to deal with. or would be helpful for me to deal with. My hurt inner child, my difficulties, my traumas. Let's just talk about those. That's way more fun and entertaining, right? And it can distract away from doing the extremely hard emotional work of reflecting. And usually the things that we see in other people is a reflection of something that we don't like or we have a challenge within ourselves. But because it's not as bad as so and so, it gives myself a pass to not have to deal with those things. So it happens very commonly. And yeah, it's unhealthy and crappy, but it's very, very common. And again, back to empathizing. Why do we do it? Why does it happen? Because I'm in pain and I don't want to be honest. Because I don't trust you. Because I see what you talk about Sally Mae dealing with her shit. I'm going to be honest and vulnerable with you. And now I'm going to be having a prayer request next week because, I shared with you my challenges. Like, yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
And so some of the things we've been getting deep in is actually dealing with our pain, reevaluating ourselves. I think one of the biggest connecting points that I had when I first met you was your positive mindset, was your ability to almost always be happy, the gamzo le tova, this too is for the good mindset. But it seems with what you're sharing is that there's a time for those things, and there's a time to be able to reflect and be gracious with ourselves. Can you talk about like what that transition has looked like? Are you still the happy-go-lucky Phil where everything is, you're just always happy, always full of energy? Or has there been maybe a transition to where it's like, it's time for me to maybe express my emotions and try to get in tune with my feelings a little bit more?
Yeah, great question. So I think I was in a lot of that. It was denial, right? Like, hey, this too is for the good. Don't, like Jesus said, don't worry. And so therefore, only talk about positive, only think about positive. If you feel sad, if you feel angry, if you feel grief, you have 3.5 seconds, and then you need to get back to faith and back to positivity because ain't nobody got time for that. And again, it's back to my upbringing, right? Again, I'm a military upbringing and 80s upbringing is we don't have time to complain, no excuses, let's move on. And again, this is generational. And you think about the boomers and the things that they saw and have dealt with, the abuse that was common. I mean, you could freaking beat your kid, it was legal to like beat your wife until like, I don't even know, like 1920. Like there was no law against it. It was perfectly fine. And so like the level of abuse and difficulty that has been just like, yeah, that's just life. You spank your kids and if they have a welt on, or you throw them down the stairs or whatever, like, it is what it is. And again, that wasn't directly in my household necessarily, but those things were passed on. And it's, you don't cry, you don't complain. I'll give you something to cry about, and then you're going to get whooped. Right. And so all that stuff is just continually passed down. And it's unhealthy, right? Like there's damage being done to small children that we're not equipped to handle that level of intensity at that age. So reflecting on some of those things and feeling the sadness and maybe the anger that I wasn't allowed to feel, right? It was not tolerated because if you feel angry, you're going to be in trouble, and then you're going to be in trouble and you're not going to get healthy attention. You're going to get negative attention. And so you just suppress it. All right. So then I just fell into that was my role. Go with the flow, people please, don't complain, put a smile on, and stay high energy, high activity. And again, it served me very well for a very long time. And so that still is my tendency, right? Like as we talked about Enneagram before, right? So Enneagram, I think I'm a number 7. I always want to go on to the next thing, high energy, do all the things. But many times it can be a distraction from mainly sadness, anger, and grief. And so now I like kind of run at that in a weird, not fully sadistic, but a little bit of just like, am I feeling one of those 3 things? If I am, sit with it and feel it. And there's another saying, if you don't feel it, you cannot heal it. And it is one of the most difficult things and mentalities for me to then, it's counterintuitive. It's so much emotional work. I would rather run a marathon than sit with the sad feeling for 30 minutes. Like it's bonkers how difficult it is. But I think it's extremely paramount in becoming fully like in touch with the other side of my emotions, or befriending the dark emotions. There's another book that I've read recently or listened to audiobook called Befriending the Dark Emotions. And yeah, that's been challenging, but I don't know if I answered that question or not.
No, yeah, you did. And that was the one thing you'd been sharing about getting in touch with your emotions. And I guess my idea of Phil Brothers and who he was as a person, it was like he doesn't ever really get sad. He doesn't really get angry. And it's like, how can Chad be more like Phil Brothers? Because it's like you've just been able to conquer all of these things. And so many times I remember in my life, I would feel guilty and kind of be that perfectionist of myself because it's like, dude, like, Phil and just doesn't deal with these things. So like, Chad, like, buck up, like, stop crying about this or stop getting emotional about this, like, because you have a good role model who is showing you how to do it. And I just couldn't grasp in my mind. It's like, how is this possible? Like, what am I missing? Like, I must be not. Maybe I'm not close enough to God. Maybe I'm not praying enough. Maybe what's wrong with me? Like you were bringing up, like, and you talked about denial, like it was that present in your mind, or because it sounds like you were talking about that it benefited you quite well, you were able to overcome a lot of those things in your mind. Can you identify like what was going on? Did it feel right, or was there always something there where it's like, this is just really really hard, this is taking a lot of effort and a lot of work to be able to put on, maybe not this persona, but this positivity?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would like it under a credit card, right? You got a credit card, and me and you make the same amount of money, but I have 10 times more things than you, right? Like I bought a car, boom. Well, I have to drive this, 12-year-old car that's, I'm always having to repair, deal with this. Phil's got a brand new car. What the hell? Am I not saving enough? Am I spending on other things? What's going on? Bam, I bought new carpet. Bam, I bought new clothes. Bam, new shoes, right? Like I'm just putting all this shit on my credit card, and I'm not feeling any pain because the collectors aren't coming. They're not. There's no payment due yet, right? So I'm just putting it all on credit card, and it's like, hey, bro, just put it on credit and believe it'll handle itself. That was the mentality, right? Guess what, motherfucker? You can't do that forever, and the bill collectors start knocking on the door, and it's you owe a shit ton of interest now. And what that looked like and how that showed up was multiple ways, but one of the main ways was when I got divorced, right? And so in my mind, again, how did it feel in the time? I didn't have any problems, right? My life was perfect, family was perfect, my relationship was perfect, I had enough money, I was great at my job. Like at that time leading up to that, like there was no difficulty that I had felt as a general rule. Occasionally when I feel sad, sure, move on. It's that lasted 1 minute, and then I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to go play basketball. I'm going to go turn on a show. I'm going to go do whatever to distract and move on. Activity can distract from that. And I was not aware until I was probably 35 or so. And then it was like, hey, by the way, now you're divorced. And it's like my whole world just exploded and turned itself on its head. So that was a big deal. That was a big turning point.
And when you were going through that process of all this positivity, did you ever look at people and be like, why can't they just get it? Like, why is it so difficult?
Yeah, I need you to repeat that question. I think my ghetto ass internet paused for a second.
Oh, okay. Your video's off.
I can see it.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, I can see it.
I guess I have ghetto ass internet. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So the question was, is when you were going through all that positivity before you made the transition and everything just kind of hit you in the face, did you ever look at other people who were struggling or had that sadness and just try to have a difficult time understanding how they weren't able to just like do the positivity, do the Gamzo Leitova, and why things were just so difficult for them?
Yeah, why don't they just use their credit card? This is easy, guys. Swipe it and move on.
Okay.
Literally, I just did it. I did not get it. I did not understand. I did not empathize. Again, I get the theory of sadness, but I did not feel it as a general rule. Like it was just, again, such denial and a declining of those dark emotions. Because if I actually gave myself space and time to feel sadness, I think it would have been too overwhelming for me at that time to be able to deal with. And again, I believe a lot of it stemmed from early childhood and the sadness and abandonment that I had felt. And again, my parents were both physically present in the home until I was 16, but there was still certain aspects that I was suffering from that I didn't realize until a lot more of reflection and therapy. But yeah, I could not empathize with somebody who's like, "Oh, I'm so sad," or I'm like, there. And sometimes I would get mad, like, "You're just complaining." I wouldn't say it to people necessarily, but it's like they're just complainers. Like, just don't complain. Just don't feel it. Right? It's all like depression. Like this all. Just don't be sad. If you have depression, just don't be sad. That was my very limited understanding. And kind of back to what Jake was saying about, like, I was just a kid, so I didn't know what to think about the religious group or the church or whatever. Like, I didn't know what to compare it to. Like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And even though I was technically an adult, emotionally I was still a child because I had not been taught, I had not been trained, I had not understood, and I really didn't have enough difficulties in my life to deal with it. Like, even though, like, yeah, I'm young and I have a bunch of kids, like, it worked out. Like, I had enough income and got along with my wife at the time enough, and there was like it was like this blind, there's no problems in the world, just swipe the credit card, dog.
Right.
Jake, how does this like set with you? Because if we look at the difference between me and you, like when I get really, really happy and really, really excited, like people can tell. Like I'm someone who has a lot of facial expressions, which I'm sure everybody can tell from like anyone who's ever seen me. Right. If you want to know how I feel, just look at my face. You'll know exactly what I think of the situation or anything. And Dad was very similar with that. It was like if he's pissed, you could tell he was pissed. If he was happy, okay, you could tell. But like Jake, you've always been someone who's kind of like been like this. Like you have a handle of your emotions, but also like, what do you think about sharing your emotions and your feelings? How does this resonate with you?
I don't know. Growing up, it was always like I had always this stoic look on my face. Like you said, I never really showed my emotions. And that's because when I was growing up, I mean, I had emotions, but I never let anybody know my emotions. Like I very rarely let anybody know. I barely talked about it, anything. And one thing that Phil was talking about earlier is if you don't feel, you don't heal. What's interesting about that is working at the rat farm, one of the only things that I actually gained from that place was after Dad had passed away, I came back and I talked to this guy. It's like he's got tattoos on his face, all over his body. He's somebody working at a rat farm. He's talking about all these stories of all of his friends doing drugs and all this. And I come back after Dad passed away and he's just like, you better feel it right now, because if you don't feel it right now, you're going to feel it for the rest of your life. Wow. And it was just like, wow. I don't know. Is the people that I work with it's like you would expect them to be, I don't know, you would expect them to be like homeless people. Like they fucked up their life. This is where they're at in life. This is the people. And then to hear that coming from that guy, it really hit me hard and was like, holy shit. Like, like it's true. And I don't know. I guess that's when Dad passed away that day. We were all just, I mean, I was literally just sitting there. Everybody was standing around him in his deathbed and we were just all talking about it. And I feel like that was one of the first times where I was ever like truly vulnerable. And then at his funeral, me giving my my speech or whatever, it was like that was like one of the first times I was ever really vulnerable with my emotions. And it's like, I don't know, a lot of it comes from that guy at the rat farm. It's like these little experiences that are very impactful. And I don't know, I guess I took that, and it's just a lot of people base their ideas and their thoughts off of like a religion or something. And I don't know, I'm more interested in philosophy and stoicism and how people interact with each other. Like I would like to believe there is a creator. I do believe there is a creator, but that's not where my morals come from. I feel like it's just the reason I was put here is to just love other people and empathize and sympathize and just feel emotion for other people and make people's lives better. And Yeah, that's something that I was not very fond of as a little kid. It was always do this, get better at this, sports, get better, get better, get better, focus on that. And there was never anything that was restricting me from sharing my emotions, but it was also, I just never did.
And when you're talking about get better, do you feel like that was a voice that was pressed upon you by like me and dad, or do you feel like that was a voice that you were kind of telling yourself, or was it coming from outside sources or inner sources, or what would you say that was?
I don't know. I think it's just wired in me. Like, even to this day, when I do anything that I do, I want to get better as quickly as possible. Like, if I start woodworking, okay, what things can I do? What little projects can I build to get better as efficiently as possible? Or if I don't know, if I play golf, how can I get better at golf the fastest way I possibly can? And it's just, I don't know, I feel like just how I'm wired.
Both of the things that you guys shared resonate with me in terms of growing up in the 80s and just like getting over things, right? So it's like, don't cry, get over it. Or Jake saying, like, you just don't share emotions. One of my things is where my people pleasing tendency come from is that I want my mom and dad to be happy. I don't want them to be in a bad mood. And so I was always trying to walk around on eggshells to make sure that they were always in a good mood and that I didn't do anything to like put them in a bad mood. And as I look at my previous relationship, like I felt myself just going around and doing that when it wasn't really something that was necessarily of me, but it was just, it felt right because it was what I kind of grew up with. And so I feel exactly what you guys are saying with that, is that so many of my things that I've brought now is like, oh, what's this person going to think of me if I do this? Or how at work do I try to do this so that they don't get upset or they're not in a bad mood today? And it's like, holy cow, like that's not healthy. It's just not healthy in terms of relationships. There should be a healthy relationship where things just flow and it shouldn't be just up down or up or down and just make them not be down, make them not be down, don't let them be down, like keep it's like I can't do that. And I think for me it was about just realizing that I'm not perfect and nobody's perfect. We're all going to make the mistake, all going to make mistakes. I'm trying to minimize the amount of mistakes I made, but I, like you've been sharing, Phil, is that I have to be gracious with myself and I have to be willing to understand that, because for me, that feeling of like don't put somebody in a bad mood just restricted me so much to where it's like I couldn't be myself, and I'm still like trying to figure out how to do that. Like I still, like, even if I'm on the phone, like sometimes I feel like there's something funny that I could say, whether it's like inside the workplace, and it's like, well, where's the line of what's like over the line and not. Most of the times my things aren't over the line, but I'm just so scared because I don't want to offend anybody or make somebody mad or anything like that, where I just hold back so much to where I think sometimes I don't get a deep connection because of how restricted I am, of not wanting to hurt somebody or put them in a bad mood.
Yeah, what's the one book? Is like The Art of Not Giving a Fuck or something like that. By Manson is the last name of the author.
Hey, that is a book. I don't remember who the author is.
Yeah, but nevertheless, that's the point, right? Is like, so what you're sharing, it sounds like. So first of all, Jake, thank you for sharing that with the rat farm guy. The unexpected wisdom and beauty and poetry and depth that we find in the unsuspecting places is mind blowing, right? And so like that's some of the things that, like with the biblical narrative and concept of like Jesus going with the sinners and eating with the tax collectors and the whores, and like that being okay. Like that's where true connection can happen, when we understand we don't have to put on this front. We don't have to try and shine the outside of the glass to prove ourselves or whatever. Like we can just be working at, by the way, I wrote down on my notes here, like Jake works at a mouse whorehouse. But at the mouse whorehouse, there's ironically wisdom that is there, but we're so trained into thinking about it's in the White House or it's in this religious, or this pure and perfect and whatever thing. And like Jesus turned that on its head, right? And many other religious leaders did too, right? It's not just keeping it to the biblical narrative. There's so many aspects where that has been the case. And just experiencing connection on a deep human level with vulnerability, and giving grace and space for each other in that is so powerful. So I appreciate you sharing that, Jake.
Yeah.
But yes, back to the people pleasing thing, right? Like just to not give a fuck, and back to the thing of like, just be happy, right? Well, just not give a fuck. Well, no, it's not that simple, right? Like, why am I doing this? What are my tendencies from my childhood of not wanting to upset my parents? What was going on with that, right? And then how do I give myself grace and space in that of knowing, okay, right now I am doing that, right? And so one of the things I've been doing in therapy is like, am I carrying something that's not mine to carry? And the answer usually is yes.
Yeah.
For me, right? And back to your relationship, I don't want to make her upset, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the thing. Well, do you want to do the thing? Is the thing going to serve you well? I don't have time to think about that. I just keep that person happy, and therefore I'm not in conflict. And so therefore, for right now, that feels fine, and that's what it is. Well, again, that's swiping the credit card again. Cool, but you're suffering. You don't know it. You might not be conscious of it, but now, okay, you've literally given up X years of your life or X situations of your life to serve someone else. And guess what? That shit crumbled anyway. Man, that's really fucking frustrating. Wow, I need to do some reflection. And I'm speaking from my experience. I'm not projecting into yours, but for me, I can relate to that, and I saw that. And so now I'm through therapy is I'm gonna fight about it, right? And I'm not gonna intentionally fight about it. I'm not gonna try and get in a fight, but I'm gonna speak up. Hey, I'm not okay with that. I don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable with that. And now you're going to disagree with that, and we're going to talk about it. And it sucks, and it's hard, and it's difficult, but it has caused so much growth in me, as well as discomfort. But I don't know how that resonates with either of you guys as far as people pleasing or anything else.
And for you, as you do this transition where you're expressing these things and you're trying to have that growth, but you're also give and take, right? So if you disagree on something and she disagrees on something and you guys both just disagree, well, it's going to be really, really difficult. There has to be some type of common ground. So what has been your key for trying to express common ground? Something that I've seen just recently, and again, I don't have anybody to use this approach with, so it's not really big of a learning type of deal, but I think it's really, really important when it comes to me talking with my family is sharing how something makes me feel. It's like when you did that, that made me feel really, really neglected, or I don't really want to go out to a concert because when I go to a concert, I just feel really, really overwhelmed and I get a lot of anxiety and I don't feel comfortable doing that. Instead of just saying something like, I don't want to go to this concert with you, or I don't want to go to this expensive restaurant with you. It's not that I don't want to go with you, it's that sometimes these fancy places, they just make me feel really, really out of my comfort zone. And I don't feel like I fit in at these places. And like I just feel like that has a lot higher of an impact. Not to take away from me asking you the question of how you guys have been able to try to work together with that.
Yeah, I think owning my feelings and my perspective and not worrying about what that person thinks, feels, or believes, right? I have a belief and you have a belief. And sometimes they may align and sometimes they may not. And that does not make my belief less valuable, less important. And that has been something that's not been my tendency. It's just like, okay, what does my sister want? She wants to eat at McDonald's. We're going to eat at McDonald's. I might want to eat at Wendy's. But at the point, I just gave up. I don't want to fight about it because, again, it was a difficult personality. I'm going to be fighting about almost anything I say. So just decline all my preferences unless it's a level 10, then maybe have that. Otherwise, just give in, right? And so now we've eaten at McDonald's the last 3 times, and I don't want to eat at McDonald's. Well, I do. Okay, cool. So we have 2 or 3 options here. Option 1, you can eat at McDonald's, and then I can choose to not eat at McDonald's, and I'm going to eat a sandwich, or I'm going to eat Wendy's, or I'm going to do something else. I'm not going to McDonald's. Well, then that person might get mad. Well, that's dumb. I'm mad at you. You're going to screw up our dinner because you won't eat at McDonald's. Again, I have a feeling, and I'm tired of McDonald's. And if you're not willing to try and go somewhere else, I'm taking my autonomy, my choice, and I don't have to do that. And I'm going to refrain. And if you want to fight about it and disagree and be upset about it, I can't control how you think, how you feel on the other side of this. I just know for myself, if I eat McDonald's again, I am eliminating my choice in this. I'm abandoning my preference, and I've done that for too long, and I'm done doing that. And so we have decisions to make. I care about you. I love spending time with you. I love eating with you. I'm not willing to go to McDonald's tonight. Something seemingly so simple, and maybe you're gonna be upset about it for 10 minutes or an hour, or in my previous relationship, days, sometimes 2 or 3 days for a seemingly small argument, because it's I should always get what I want, or we should always do everything together, and if we don't, it's going to be a big deal. And it's like, it's not that big of a deal. I just, in this moment, I'm not willing to do that. And you have a decision and I have a decision, and they might not always align. And that's okay. And we can disagree. We can do things differently. We do not have to agree on everything in friendship, relationship, family. We probably shouldn't. And if we're not disagreeing enough or arguing enough or having difference, then are we just going along with the other person's doing? This concept of enmeshed relationships is what I've come across recently. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that terminology, but basically, typically it's in relations like romantic relationships, right? Like I jokingly think about like the Facebook co-accounts. It's like Jake and Phil,
Yeah.
and like this is our Facebook, and we have both of us. And so like when someone's like private messaging you, like, which one of you motherfuckers is hitting me
Yeah.
up? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know which one. There's 2 names here. But that is my picture of like in a enmeshed relationship. Like we can be individuals. Like I can like these things and do these things. You can like and do these things, and we don't always have to be together. That was not the case in my first relationship. It was like family, everything, relationship, everything. And we do the same things almost always. Again, maybe you can do a guys' night once a year or twice a year, but as a general rule, we do everything together, right? Which, but looking back, it sounds like hell. And now my autonomy is speaking up, my individualism is speaking up so much louder. So how do we deal with that? Sometimes we just uncomfortably disagree and we sit with discomfort. I was not willing to do that in my first relationship. I didn't know how. And now that's happening. So my wife gets the blessing of more disagreements.
Wouldn't you say that also comes from a Christian, or I shouldn't say it, a religious mindset of, I remember the Garden of Peace books by Shalom Arush. It was just like, we'll always be the best, always give them what it is that they're striving for. So this idea, I believe that it's not only associated just with one person or that person being wrong or whatever the case, but it's this religious idea that's created in us to be Jesus, to be the servant, to lay down, to put them before yourself, and to always give, 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 give. And that is true love. That is true compassion. And that is what brings the Messiah.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Or because I feel like for me, that was the push. It wasn't. Sometimes I would say, yeah, it was being afraid to do stuff, but I hope in my mind and in my heart that it was because I wanted to be pure and I wanted to have the best intentions as possible. And it was like I just wanted to be that maybe again that perfect Chad in God's eyes.
Yeah, I can relate to that 1,000%, right? So, husbands, die into yourselves and live for your wife, like Jesus did for the body, for the church. All right, cool. Self-sacrifice, give yourself up, just like Jesus. He's the goal, and so die on the cross, give up of yourself. It's a gross misunderstanding of what's going on there, in my opinion. The Garden of Peace has definitely screwed me up, and I'm on repairing and healing from some of that. It served me very well for a very long time, right? Like if my wife is getting whatever the hell she wants and I'm doing whatever. And again, I wasn't suffering at the time. I was just like, I'm doing right. And because I'm doing God's will and doing right, I'm at peace. So I didn't feel like, oh, I'm giving up myself. Boo. It was just like, this is what I do. I follow God and I die to myself, and she's happy. The kids are happy. We're homeschooling and the freaking birds are chirping and the rainbows are shining and like, cool. Until it wasn't, right? Until
Yeah.
she was unhappy and didn't say shit for a long time. And then all of a sudden, bam, again, I view it as trauma finally spoke up within her. I'm unhappy. I don't want to live like this. My autonomy speaking up, and now I don't have the bravery or ability to speak and deal with it. So therefore, I'm just gonna, go about it a different way. And now we don't have a marriage. And then that's just like a grief of that relationship, a grief of reality of what I believe, which is you live the right way, the way God says, which is die to yourself, let your wife be happy, and therefore everything will work out, and you're going to live this blissful heavenly life until you don't. And now it's like, guess what, motherfucker? There's new rules, and that doesn't work. And that's, for me, that does not work. I don't subscribe to that. I think it's very unhealthy. I think it's very toxic for basically suffering, right? Like men to suffer and give up over themselves. So that's how I've kind of interpreted that and seen I was abandoning myself. And now there's a piece of me that's very angry. Again, we've talked a little bit about IFS, right? Internal family systems, which basically we have multiple parts within ourselves. And one of the parts that I'm speaking up is my angry part that I have suppressed and shoved in the closet and closed the door and say, you sit there. You can't be angry because your dad's going to get upset with you. You can't be angry because your sister's going to argue. You can't be angry because your coach is going to bench you. You can't be angry because your wife's going to be upset at you. Fill in the blank, that pattern. You can't be angry. And now that motherfucker has grown to be a grown-ass man, and he kicked the door open and he said, no fucking more. I need to have a voice in this. This is bullshit. You've suppressed this too long, and I need a place at the table, because it's not just one voice. It's not just one perspective. That has been revolutionary, and that's been very recent, within the last 6 months or so, but it's been empowering for me.
Jake, does hearing Phil and me talk about this, does this kind of resonate with what we've been reading in the New Testament and the struggles I think that we've shared, and just the things that are being said? It's like, I can't be that perfect. Like, how do I continue to just give in today's day and age and not get taken advantage of? Like, how do I try to make money instead of always being the entry level employee, always mopping the floor when nobody else wants to do it, always, essentially like being like mom was at Savory, like doing everybody else's work and always doing absolutely everything for everybody and just being worn out. Obviously, she got success from it, but like, that's just what I feel when I go through the New Testament, where I just like, dude, like, this sounds great in theory, in fairy tales and everything like that, but how can I do this? Like, I just can't be that. Like, that's great for Jesus, who is the Messiah of the world, to be able to atone for all of our sins and do everything perfectly so that we could have salvation. But it's like that, what would Jesus do? It's like, yeah, what would Jesus do? Well, you're not going to be the Messiah, are you? Well, no. Okay, so maybe we shouldn't put ourselves on that type of a standard to try to compare how do we be sinless and how do we just like do the will of the Father or God inside of that.
Right. I mean, I think we were talking about it. It would work the way that we perceive it is, I mean, we want to be Jesus-like, which is always just doing the right thing, putting yourself at the sacrifice of something else. And it's like, in a perfect world, that works. If everyone's idea is, I will sacrifice myself for someone who needs it more, that's a great way of looking at life, if everyone is living that way. But then you have to take an outside perspective of, there are people out there that will take advantage, and they will take everything that you give them, and they will take everything from you, and they will take advantage of that with no hesitation. The morality goes out the window. They don't care. They want to make money. Those people are going to rise in that society. So you have to do what's right, follow your morals, your ethics, all of that, but you still have to be happy yourself. You can't live a life of permanent sacrifice and doing everything for the needy when you're doing things for people who are just trying to take advantage and are just manipulative. And yeah.
And even when they're not, like, even if it's your family, like, you just love your family so much and you want to be everything for them, that they may not even just being manipulative. It's that they just need help, and that we just become that servant to them to give them everything, and we lose ourselves. Like, there's that scenario too.
Yeah, I think what made me think about that, what you're saying, Jake, is like one of the commandments, right? Love your neighbor
Mm-hmm.
as you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And we have gotten that backwards to where we love our neighbor way more than
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. Put yourself on the back burner. Don't think about yourself and go love and give unconditionally and unlimited. Guess what? It's a limited resource. Like we only have so much, and then we're going to start crumbling. We're going to start suffering. There's another book called The Body Keeps the Score,
Mm.
right? There's like illnesses and things that come of that. It's scientific. I think rheumatoid arthritis is one of them that this book mentions, right? And so, unfortunately, women get that much more on a substantially higher percentage, and they, especially as in a mother figure or mother role, that's the societal role that they've been shown and given and told.
Mm.
You give up for your family, you give up for your kids, you don't have a life, you just do your thing, you sacrifice. Mom, she works and she does what she does and she sacrifices for the whole family. Well, are you feeling well? Are you feeling taken care of? Are you feeling? Doesn't matter. I do it for
Mm.
the family. Well, you're suffering. There's a cost to that. It's not unlimited. And so I think we're misseeing it, and we're not serving ourselves well. And yeah, love yourself, love your neighbor as you love yourself. You have to be able to love yourself and understand what that is in order to keep that commandment, which is
Mm.
a new way of looking at it for me.
Something that's been really encouraging for me as I go through this process and really trying to find out more of myself is that oftentimes I have a lot of ideas and a lot of things that I want to do. I'm very goal driven and I want to make the best in the workplace. And I've caught myself so many times having ideas or thinking of something that should be done or a way in which something should be done, and I'd be like, hey manager, how do you want me to do this? And just instead of saying this is how I think it should be done, because well, they're the manager and these are my boundaries. And so here in this new job that I've been given, I've just started taking the initiative to start creating these things. And I think we should do this. I think we should do this. I think we should do it with the podcast, with the book club, reaching out to my family. I think we should have a book club. I've already created all the books instead of asking what books should be. Like, why am I asking what books everybody's going to read? Is that there's only 10 books that I want to read, and I'm very particular about what books I want to read. So why the hell am I asking everybody when I already know? And if they say that that's 10 other books, it's like, well, I don't want to be part of the book club now. So it's like the whole idea that I just created is gone because I didn't want to put myself out there and just share and see if everybody else liked my ideas. Because there's some people who don't like trying to figure out all these things and doing all the research about what is the good book and what are the best books. And I do that and I do it great. But I don't take initiative to share all these things and to create all these things because it's like, oh, well, I want to allow other people to do it. And I've just seen so much more success in the workplace. It was like, listen, we need to hire somebody. Okay, well, so then I wrote out an Indeed listing. You guys like this? Well, maybe change this. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Okay, boom. Okay, can we post it? Yeah. Okay, so okay, we have these interviews. Like, okay, I'm gonna call these people, interview them on the phone. Okay, they're like, it's just like, it's every time I come up with the new, it's like, yes, yes, yes. It's like, holy cow, dude, like this is awesome. Where before I was like, okay, just waited for everything to happen
Mm.
inside the workplace and I'm just sitting over there, I'm not learning anything, I'm not being of any more value. When I have so much value to bring, I just have to do it.
You were glitching out there for a second for me.
I was.
I couldn't tell if you were done talking or not.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But yeah, that's something that I've kind of taken into my life recently too. It's just you just have to do things. Like I was a very big procrastinator, and it was just do the things that you want to do, and if they don't work out or if you don't like doing them anymore, just stop doing them. Like you just have to live based off of what you want to do. And sure, sometimes you have to negotiate with your wife or your siblings or your parents or whatever. But at the end of the day, do the things that you like to do. Like it's just simple as that, kind of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to yeah, I want to just hire somebody to clean my house because there's one thing I hate doing. And it's just like, why the hell am I doing this? It's like, well, the reason I'm doing it is because I want to save money. And it's just like, just pay somebody to do it. Like, you have the money, pay somebody to cut the yard. Like, I don't like doing it. I don't want to do it. But it's like, oh, well, I don't want to pay. So I was like, golly, dude.
Yep. Fair point. I want to go back to one thing that stood out to me. I'm changing the subject a little bit, but what you were sharing earlier, Jake, about the concept of restricting emotion. I always restricted emotion. There wasn't really any particular reason why, like why I might have. That's just what I did. I'm curious in that because I know some of the banter that you guys have gone, and Chad and I have talked about this a little bit, but like, especially in sports culture, right? Like, the way that you're winning in life is when you're ripping your buddy's ass in like jokes and burning them and cooking them, right? And you're just like, oh, I got him, right? So, but you can't show the vulnerability that it hurt your feelings or made you upset or, oh, damn, he got me. I'm just going to give a quicker, faster, funnier, witty comeback. And then boom, I'm one up again, right? I imagine that was similar in your guys' household of kind of like survival of the fittest. So you can't show that emotion of sadness or bothered because that's going to give weakness, and then the pack is going to, rip your ass up. I'm curious if that resonates or is that not? Am I far off there?
For me, honestly, I don't know. It kind of felt like I was the youngest one, so I wasn't really ever the target, mainly because I was very quiet. So nobody was ever like, hey, the quiet person's not saying anything, let's go attack him. It's always either Chad was saying something or Isaac was saying something. So it was always, they were the main focus. So I was never really worried about the pack collapsing on me per se. And I feel like if I did speak up and say something, then yeah, sure, it may have been stupid and they would have made fun of me, but it would have happened. But I just always felt like being the youngest one, if like one of the middle children or something started making fun of me or started beating me up or something, I know that either Chad or Josh or something would have like jumped in and started beating up the person that was beating me up. So I don't know. It was never really a state of, oh, I hope the pack doesn't turn on me, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, no, fair. So I was probably projecting because that's how it was for me. Like, I mean, we would rip on my parents. Like, there was no safe boundaries. Like, we would rip on each other. I mean, you get in the locker room, forget about it, dude. You are just, so you can't show that something bothers you or hurts you, right? And so you just got to put on this stoic mentality. Like, you can't hurt me, dude. I mean, David Goggins, right? Can't hurt me.
Yeah.
Again, everything has a price to pay, and at some point, back to the rat farmer's wisdom. If you don't feel it now, like you're gonna be feeling it for a long time until you address it. So,
and so when I think about that question for myself, Phil, when we were part of the church, we had a men's Wednesday night Bible study, and there were so many times where I think I felt similar to like what Jake was sharing, that I was just didn't have the full knowledge or wisdom to be able to share inside of that. And if I did, I felt maybe I would get ridiculed or look dumb. And so it took a lot of time and an effort. And to now where I've grown to be a man to where I think I could be able to stand up for myself, essentially insecurities and a lack of self-confidence. When you were in a big group like that setting, did you ever feel those types of things?
It was pretty rare, honestly, because again, back to what Jake was sharing about like the woodworking, like just be the best, be awesome, do well, be efficient, be effective, do your thing. And like I would study the hell out of the Bible to be able to out debate or outthink or think something, an insight that no one else is going to share, right? Like I worked my ass off so that I could shine in that arena, so that I could, right? And also I was playing by a little bit different rules. And what I mean by that is like that group that we were hanging with was mostly traditional Christian with barely touching into some Hebrew roots, right? They actually were against using the terminology Messianic Judaism because that was a no term. They were against Jewish rabbis. They were against the traditions in that regard. That I was not, right? So I would bring an insight or something that I believed would shine some insight, and I knew it would likely get disagreed with, but I was okay with that. I was almost playing like this devil's advocate type of scenario. And because very few of those people were versed or scholarly enough to be able to dig into that, like it was kind of like my advantage in the arena. And so I mean, again, it was pretty darn rare where I felt like that inferior or like insecure that if all what I'm going to say is going to get cooked, because I would just bring up something else that maybe couldn't be refuted. And again, this is all competitive language, right? Like what are you actually looking to win? Like the Bible is not for winning. It's for living a spiritually fulfilled life that we can engage with humanity in love and joy and peace and enrich each other and lift up each other. That is not how many times, as I reflect back, that wasn't my intent, but as I reflect back, it was a competitive thing for me to bring myself validation and to get validation in the eyes of those around me of, oh, wow, he's smart, he's wise, he reads, he understands, he's spiritual, he's close to God. Like these are some of the things that as I reflect back, that's what I was going after. And not my intent, but my deeper down part of me was suffering to the point where I have been searching for that validation for a long time. I don't want to continue in that realm of validation like that. I want to uplift those around me and bring an enjoyment to those, and also respect for difference. Like we may not agree on things of how you see things spiritually, philosophically, whatever that might be, and that's okay, because there's beauty in difference and there's necessary in difference, and celebrating that is more important to me now than ever of those differences.
And Phil, when you go back to that idea of community that we had, like this is just when I think about that, it was like it was a closer community than I ever really, I don't know, maybe felt inside of my extended family, to where if I ever needed anything, any of those people inside of that church, I felt like they were going to be there and they would help me with just about anything that I could ever ask for. And as I've came out of that, I miss that feeling. I don't miss the ideologies and the maybe the arrogance and the pride that was associated with that, and maybe the idea of wanting to separate from maybe society, not being able to be accepted by our families and stuff. But I really do miss that closeness and community. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you miss the community, the camaraderie, the closeness?
Maybe to a degree. I think, again, I probably found it in other ways. Again, maybe not to the same capacity, but that community comes at a price, right? And reflecting on, you're giving up your autonomy. And if you don't agree, you either have to shut the hell up and go along with that so that you can be part of the community to that level, or you have to just conform, right? And again, you're giving up your autonomy if you're doing that, if you don't agree. But nevertheless, with that being the case, I mean, different ways, shapes, and forms. I mean, again, right now, right, with kids and kids and sports, things of that nature, right? Like having some friends that we've met that way, and other people I feel that are reliable, trustworthy, meaningful. Some people that live around us, and some people that don't. But I think I found it somewhat in some ways, but again, not to that level of depth, right? Or that vulnerability or that deep. We're meeting 2 or 3 times a week and we're sharing deep spiritual ponderings and wisdoms and uplifting things, like, so probably not to the same level. And part of me probably does miss some of that.
Well, that's a really good point. That's something that I hadn't really considered, is that the only way you get to that level of connectedness and closeness is by agreeing on so many different things. And once you start disagreeing, you separate. So you don't have that level of autonomy. And that's interesting, because this is one of the concerns that I've had as we advance as a society, is that there's more options and opportunity for each one of us to do things. And like Jake was sharing earlier, is that choose the things that you do to like. Well, the more opportunities are for me to like this and like this, and the more technology and options we have, the more we separate ourselves from each other. And so as we do that, as a society, we're going to continue to be different. So I guess my biggest concern, and maybe not for myself, well, for myself, and I think also for society, is that how do we continue to try to be individualistic, but also be able to come together for maybe the good of others.
Yeah, I think again, it's that general respect and love and appreciation for the human beings in front of me, right? And whoever that human being is, the guy on the rat farm, the guys in the freaking weird ass duck shirts, like whoever that might be, there's difference, and I want to celebrate that, right? Exactly. Like there's beauty and there's nuance and there's silliness and there's things that we need in others that are different. And having that perspective and pursuing that perspective, I think is really important, right? I think, unfortunately, many times it is religious, right? We become very, very, like similar, polarized. If it's not this, then it's bad. Same thing with politics. If it's not my side, then it's bad and wrong. And therefore, we must right this injustice in the world and make them like us, or they will pay. They will be punished. They will be destroyed until we're all the same. And that is not the biblical message. That's not many of the spiritual faith outlook, spiritual messages of other traditions. Variety makes a difference. It's just, I believe, a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of those, and used and weaponized, unfortunately. So having that appreciation for difference and pursuing that is important. But we're so scared. There's so much fear of different. So much fear of, well, those people have a different skin color or a different belief, or they live in a different neighborhood. I don't know. I've heard what happens in those instances. I can't investigate. And it's having the bravery of one at a time, saying, I want to make myself uncomfortable and press into those differences so that I can understand the the other point, even if it's different.
And I think that's something that's always been special about you, is that I always feel like we can agree to disagree. Like whether you say his name is Jesus or Yeshua or whatever, and that was something that always would make me sad. It's like, why are we disagreeing on so many of these minute facts, guys? Like if he wants to do this and he wants to do this, it's not like it's gonna blow up the community. Like if they want to drive their car on Saturdays, but they don't think it's okay to do that, or if they want to have a Christmas tree, it's like, well, no, that's sin. It's this idea where I think it all goes back to your value system. Is like, well, a Christmas tree means that you're pagan and that you're celebrating evil, and it's like the difference between good and evil, and that's where it all like. It seems that most things when it comes to breaking divisiveness in community, it has to do with some level of that.
Yeah, and again, I think not all, but the vast majority of it goes back to that trauma, back to the hurt, back to the father wounds that we were talking about. I am so insecure in myself that I have to make it be like a law or a rule or mandatory that you be like me so that you validate what I have chosen as truth. And therefore it's the best and it's right. And when you do it like I do it, we have validated each other. Whew, good thing we're like this. And can't believe Jake's not. Like, why isn't he doing the thing? Jake, you need to be doing the thing or else you're not validated like us. And now it feels us even better than Jake because he's not doing the thing and we are. And now I can feel this comfort in this fear and pain and difficulty that I haven't addressed from young childhood, and I ain't gonna do it because it's too much work. It's easier just to put someone down, tear them down, and make them feel different than that. It's bizarre.
I think that I don't know. Everybody's always looking for differences, and I feel like the different way that people can live their lives, it's what makes conversations interesting. Like you speak to somebody from like Dave, who owns the gym from Tonga. It's like he's a very he's a
This
very
guy's over here just
My phone's
traveling.
about to die, so I'm plugging it in. I'm staying
He's
with
fitting
you.
to sit. He's fitting to sit on that toilet while he talks to us.
yeah. But yeah,
Right.
Dave from Tonga out in this he's from this from this island out in the middle of the ocean, and it's like he's super interesting to talk to just because his experience is so different. And everybody's looking for these experiences, or everybody's looking for these differences to pick apart and kind of split everybody together and put them in a group. And it's like everybody is so similar, and they don't realize that everybody's going through the human experience. Like, everybody's feeling these emotions. Everybody's experiencing loss to some degree. Everybody's feeling sadness to some degree. You don't sit down and think about, this person is having like a rough day, so maybe I should be a little bit compassionate. But since this person believes something other than I do, I don't really care. Even though this person is so similar to me, regardless of their skin color. We live in the same state, city, neighborhood, whatever. And it's just the human experience, and everybody's looking for all these differences to set us apart.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. It's the idea of the human race, and that's the race that matters. And if we can just sit down and understand that each person is valuable, and this is my thing, is that if we do believe in a creator, then we believe that he created all living beings, and he created them with the purpose and the same purpose that he created me. And so it's almost like that Kabbalistic mindset where each person has value. So it's being able to appreciate that value and treat them with that same value. Not to say no matter what their actions are, because there's some actions that are absolutely terrible that we will not allow to happen, but to be able to still show them the same kindness and compassion and being able to interact, right?
Right.
I mean, even wildly enough, right? Even when those actions are unspeakable and horrific, why did that person do that? Right? Like, again, why the pain? There's a pain or something that they're trying to get away from or get to, that they're doing these horrible actions, and understanding that and having the patience, like Gabor, of like, and sometimes it's not, you're not going to do that, right? There's enough anger or boundaries that you have that I don't care what you did, why you did that to me or my family. And like, that's not tolerable. But societally, there's a reason why that person is doing that thing or did do that thing that's unspeakable or difficult. And did we press that person as society? If you push someone in poverty long enough, and culturally, it just continues to fester generationally, and you keep a people group in poverty long enough, they're going to be fucking pissed off, and they're going to fight back. Back to that, the angry part being in the closet and kicking out. At some point, you can back an animal or a human or whoever into a fucking corner, and they're going to come out fighting. And then, what's going on? Like, what'd you do? Well, let's look at it, right? Like, if we're actually being understanding and care, like, there's a reason.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that in the animals, like you keep kicking a dog and you just kick a dog and you just kick a dog and you just kick a dog, or you don't feed them, or like, they're not going to just be this nice golden retriever that's always well behaved. And no, at some point they're going to go off because they've been mistreated. They're going to stand up for themselves, which is what we've talked about so much on this podcast, about not being a people pleaser, about having that autonomy to be able to understand what it is we like, or finally at some point saying enough is enough. You're not doing this to me anymore. Find somebody else. I'm not taking it. And boom.
Yep. So another side point, we're talking about, seeing differences. So one thing I am excited about here in the next month or so, I'm going to plan on joining a group therapy. And so I'm going to guess a group of like 8 to 12 people. I don't fully know all the deets, but my therapist has kind of been preparing me for kind of some of these things. We've been doing some emotional maturity lessons and understandings of that, but that I'm very excited, right? Because there's different types of people in there on purpose to engage in this. And it sounds like it's basically designed for having difficult conversations on purpose, right? Like, it's not like, hey, it's a cool pink shirt with the duckies. Like, oh yeah, we agree, high five.
Right.
Yeah, neat ideas. We want to make the world better, right? So it's like, hey, Jake, you think this very specific particular thing about what Phil does, and he doesn't believe or see it that way. Like, how does that make you feel? Right? Like, it's like, oh, I don't want to talk about this. But it presses you into having these conversations of candor, even amidst this difficulty and disagreement. And I'm kind of scared, but I'm pretty excited as well.
And these are people that you know, Phil, or they have information about you to be able to talk about something like that, or
They don't know. They don't know anything about me except I'm a male. I think that's the only thing they know about me.
okay. And
And I
so
don't know
when you
anything
say
about
that there's
them.
going to be opportunity for difficult conversations that would kind of be directed at you, how would that come about? Do you have like an example?
I don't. I think it's
Oh,
been kept a mystery on purpose. I think it's just more. I've done like 7 or 8 lessons of emotional maturity, right? So one of the things is like emotional mature conversations are assertive. And then it talks about passive aggressive communication, how it's not healthy. Like, oh, I wish people wouldn't wear pink shirts around me, and it makes me feel
Right.
uncomfortable. It's like,
Right.
you got a problem with my fucking shirt? No, I'm not. I'm not
Yeah,
saying
yeah, yeah.
that. No, I'm not. Not you. Just when other people wear pink shirts, then it's like it's so confusing. It's so unhealthy. It's so difficult, right? And then that's going to put you guys in an uncomfortable position. You're like, hey, you keep fucking talking about my pink shirt, bro. You got a problem? As I drink my pink drink. Um, but the point being, like, hey, when you wear a pink shirt, it makes me feel uncomfortable, and that's not your fault. I want to acknowledge. However, I still feel uncomfortable when you wear a pink shirt, and I wanted to be honest about that. Here we are. That's uncomfortable. Well, I'm not going to change my pink shirt because I love it. So what are we going to do? We're going to not do the podcast because you don't like this pink shirt? Like, what are the solutions around it? Again, it's a bizarre scenario with the pink shirt, but I don't even know if that makes sense of how I'm sharing. But
Yeah, it makes people have these ideas that sometimes they're not even backed with a belief necessarily. It's just they thought they felt this way at one point, and then when questioned about it, it's why do you feel this way? I don't really know why I feel this way. Why do you feel opposing to that? And it's like, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's a lot of the times you don't really have a backing for your belief. You just have these open, empty beliefs that don't really know why you have them.
the bigger question or is there a subconscious reason of why you have those beliefs, but you don't remember, you don't understand? Again, did it happen in childhood where someone freaking choked me with a pink shirt that I don't remember because
Right.
it's so traumatic? I put it out of my mind.
Right.
But now you spend the time and energy sitting with that and asking, why do I have a problem? There probably is a reason. It might not be valid. It might be bonkers, right? Like, but nevertheless, sometimes there is a reason. And again, sometimes you can't find that. You're like, I don't know. Do I want to keep holding to this belief? No, I don't. It's not serving me well. It's not serving my friends well. I want to come to peace with it. At the same time, acknowledging there's part of me that still feels uncomfortable with a pink shirt. But my logical greater self says, hey, I understand that you have a problem with that. There's something that may have happened. Can we come to peace with that? I want to understand that, but also I want to be at peace with those around me. People around me wear pink shirts, and I want to be able to be in a healthy relationship with them and come to peace with the fact that they like that. Again, bonkers scenario, but nevertheless.
And have there been any instances for you, Phil, as you go through this healing process to where there's certain things that maybe you don't like or you've struggled with that just by sitting by yourself, you haven't been able to figure out what it is that has brought that belief system inside of you? Has there been anything like that?
Yeah, and is the question that I haven't been able to find, or that I have found, or both?
That you haven't.
Haven't found. Again, I more go with like hypothesis, right? Like educated guess. So I don't fully know why this makes me uncomfortable, but if I sit with it long enough, I'm gonna guess it probably has to do with this, right? And again, it's because of the studying and the understanding I've been doing with trauma in our childhood, and many times it's that, right? And we don't remember directly a lot of our childhood, so it's. But there are certain instances that I do remember. I'll give an example. So we were talking about, I don't even know what we were talking about, but like my therapist asked me a question and I said, okay, I remember this one time I was like 5 years old. I was getting ready to go spend the night at someone's house. We were in Germany and we lived in like these apartment buildings. So it's like the barracks, right? And so you got, I don't know, let's call it 20 people in this building, 20 people in that building, and there's a bunch of just like apartment rows, right? And then there was this playground where we would hang out. And that was like the go-to shit. Like every after school, you go there, you play. In the summer, you play there all the time. So I think this was the summer. I was allowed to spend the night at my friend's house. I had to go get my sister, bring her back. We're gonna eat dinner, and then I got to go spend the night, right? But make sure you come back, right? So again, all the kids are playing there. There was a huge game of tag, probably like 20 kids. Like we're doing. I'm like, oh, I'll just play for a few minutes, right? I lost track of time. I came back. I was in trouble. I don't know if I got spanked or not. Probably. I wasn't allowed to stay the night at the friend's house because I didn't come directly back. I didn't get my sister. And so I didn't do it the right way. When you don't do it the right way, you're punished. When you go do fun things and it distracts you, you're punished. That's a bad thing. That is the narrative that I took away. And again, it's taken me some kind of processing understanding in that. But there's so many times now where I feel almost guilty if I'm having too much fun, especially at the expense of like the authority figure that is back that's going to hit me with a hammer is going to get me or get upset whenever I get back. I have projected that into my partner, right? My wife is that character. That's not any of her fault. That's not any of her doing. That's all my narrative that brings it into and projects that. And now there's times where something happens and I'm like, I don't want to tell her that I want to go do this fun thing because she's going to get mad. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But back to advocating for what I want to do, I'm not 5 years old anymore. I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm a grown-ass man that has preferences, and that's okay. So that's an instance of like kind of evaluating and looking back, and then how that still affects me now of speaking up and saying, hey, I want to do this thing. Or I get distracted, and then I feel guilty, and then I feel ashamed, right? I'm not a good person because I got distracted, and I was 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, an hour late, as opposed to I'm a well-meaning, kind, thoughtful human being that sometimes gets distracted. And both can be true. And it doesn't mean my intent is to be harmful and hateful and, leave my partner waiting. And I do make mistakes and I will own those mistakes. Doesn't make me a bad person. And so that doesn't answer your question of anything that I can't draw to. I can't really think of any examples that are like a huge mystery. And I think it's probably been helpful that I have had help, right, with an expert kind of kicking around hypotheses and saying, hey, is it possibly this? Is it possibly that? When you think about it, is it this? Does that even resonate? And sometimes I'm like, nah, it's not. I don't believe it's that at all. But it might be this thing, right? And so we're kicking around ideas. And it's not to go back and point blame. Oh, my parents, that's what, right? Like you were saying earlier, it's not about finding fault and be like, that's why I'm screwed up and therefore I'm going to be screwed up. It's more, I have tendencies and there's a reason I have those. And some of them are fine. And some of them I would like to heal from. Some of them I would like to modify and improve on, at the same time being patient with myself, knowing there's a reason I have those tendencies and it wasn't my fault.
No, and I know that's something with me too, is that even though I'm in this healing process, that like the example you just shared, just because I'm healing and I'm aware of it, doesn't mean that there's still that mental restriction for when I go golfing, that I'm not always checking my clock to make sure that I'm home or whatever the scenario is, that there's still that mental restriction is that when do we get to the point where we continue to work on it, where we can be free and be like, okay, I don't have the anxiety of the repercussions of what's going to happen to me if I don't do it this particular way. And that's where that freedom comes from. And I think the healing comes from that actual pain or whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and knowing that healing is kind of an ongoing thing, just like grief. I mean, again, this is a perfect kind of segue. This is Monte's gems, right? Like that grief just doesn't go away. And you spoke at the funeral, right? And there's aspects of that grief that have settled and that maybe are a little bit easier to deal with or a little bit more manageable. But that doesn't just go away. That loss does not just disappear. It feels heavier at certain times. There's probably things that bring up his memory more. They're like, man, I feel sad right now. Like I'm really feeling it heavy. That's okay. That's normal, right? Like it's still going to be some level of a scar and a missing. And that's a good thing. That means that you had a meaningful connection, with him. So that same level of that grief still being able to feel that loss at times, sometimes stronger than others, same thing with that anxiety of, I know logically that I'm not going to go home and get in trouble and not be able to spend the night. But emotionally, there's things that we cannot control in our biology. It will bring us right back to that 5-year-old state. And it takes hard work to recognize that and step back from that. And it's a lot of hard work, but it's just not going to go away because we've healed, right? Like there's still tendencies that will still trigger us back to those instances.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful with what you said. And there's always going to be that scar. And sometimes there's going to be things that get brought up that make you remember somebody that you lost or somebody that you're not close, you don't have a close connection with anymore. And it's those things that make you realize the true connection that you had with that person and the impact that they had on your life. Because if things like that didn't happen, and say nothing ever happens where I'm like, oh, that reminds me of my dad, and then it brings up a flood of other memories. It's like, if nothing ever happened like that, I would start to question, well, did he really have an impact on my life like that?
Yeah. Well said and well put. Good point. Again, the hard thing for me, my tendency is like, oh yeah, I remember that and I feel sad. Distract, run away from it. Don't feel that, right? As opposed to, you know what? I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna let myself cry. You know, I feel like I'm gonna cry. I now in this state, I don't say make myself cry, but I know I want to. I know that it's not a natural reaction. I'm going to cry, and I'm gonna let that fester and sit. I'm really gonna let it permeate. I miss and love my dad. I care for him, and man, it's really sucking right now because I'm doing this thing that really reminds me of him, and that sucks. And I feel heavy sadness right now, and I'm gonna sit with that right now. And I think it's a really powerful thing and a really difficult thing to do at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true, man. You guys have any final thoughts, man? Phil, I really appreciate. I feel like this episode we covered a lot, especially when it came to just personal development and self improvement. I know that some of my big takeaways, and as I go through this journey myself, is just continuing to try to be gracious with myself. Is that understanding that I'm doing the best that I possibly know how, that I am special. No matter if I hear it or I don't hear it, that I have to continue to watch the way that I speak to myself. And I need to speak just as positively to myself as I would speak to Jake if I was encouraging him as a young kid, or to you if I was encouraging you through something you were going through. Is that I need to be that same encouragement for myself, and to be gracious for that when I do make mistakes, that nobody's perfect. We're all imperfect, and that it's something that's expected. But I'm going to keep on trying to do better. And maybe I do hold myself to a higher standard, but just to do the best that I possibly can, and to not just get so stuck on every time I do make a mistake that I'm a failure. What do you have, Jake?
No, yeah, I think what you said right there is something that's really helped me with that scenario. Is the whole idea of just being gracious to somebody. It's the idea of, I have a problem, and if my friend was going to come at me with the same problem, or if my wife or whoever was going to come at me with the same problem, how would I treat that other person? I wouldn't treat them as if it were myself, and I'd beat myself up and be like, what are you doing? Why are you being such an idiot and acting like this? It's so simple. I would never treat them like that. So it's kind of put myself in that perspective of just be gracious to yourself. And it's like, you can only know so much and experience so much. It's your first time living life, just like it's everybody else's first time living life. Everybody lives a different experience, and you're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. Just be a little bit gracious and patient with yourself.
Yes, well put. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to come up with like this meaningful nugget, but the life is brutal is a terminology. I can't remember. I think Glennon Doyle, she said that, and I'm just like name dropping all these authors and like thought leaders and shit. But she's awesome. But life is brutal, right? Like accepting the failures, accepting the difficulties, accepting the struggles, and celebrating the struggles is really difficult, but so freaking important because that's where we learn, that's where we grow, that's where we experience humanness, and the beauty of that. And everyone goes through it. And so accepting that on ourselves and in those who we view lesser than us sometimes, and those who we, put on a pedestal. Everyone's human. We all make mistakes. We're in this together, and we can do it. Love, joy, peace, and the mouse whorehouse. Don't forget.
Phil, thanks so much for being a part of this, man.
Yeah.
It was really special just to hear everything that you had to share. Guys, we would just thank everybody that's been viewing and listening to our channel. I'll share something. My love language, one of them is words of affirmation. And so if this video impacted you, we would love to see your comments in the bottom just to be able to share, to keep the discussion going, to know that this has been impactful to you, to know that you've been supporting us or that you enjoy what we've been doing, because we're just here documenting these conversations. These are people we love, we admire, and we just enjoy speaking with. And so it's just been encouraging. We're going to keep on doing it, documenting these great stories and people that we've met in our lives. So we appreciate everybody listening. And Phil, thanks so much for being a part of this, man. Yeah. It was awesome.
It was an honor. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Yep.
Peace.